There are stories of loved ones watching over us even after they've passed. But this story is unlike any other. It's about a father's undying need to protect his family, even from beyond the grave. As eerie voices echoed through the house, it wasn't just a haunting. It was a desperate attempt to reveal a hidden truth. And when that truth finally came to light, it shattered their reality. My father passed away in 2005, just over a year after my daughter was born. It was a difficult time for our family, but we decided to move onto the farmland my father had left behind. There was something peaceful about being there, almost like my dad was still around, watching over us. At the time, my ex-husband, my sister, our baby, and I were living there together. It was an old, quiet place surrounded by nature, but something always felt off. Every few nights, my husband would wake me up, usually in the middle of the night, saying the same thing. There's a male voice in your sister's room. Still half asleep and not fully comprehending, I would always brush it off, mumbling something about it being the old man. I was so tired, but even through my drowsiness, I would catch the faint sound of my father's voice. Weeks turned into months, and my husband's eerie wake-ups became routine. Every time it was the same, he'd hear that voice. Every time, I'd tell him it was just my dad keeping an eye on us. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Then one evening, everything changed. I was standing in the kitchen, making a simple potato salad. The house was quiet, with just the soft sounds of the wind brushing through the trees outside. And that's when it happened. Behind me, clear as day, I heard my father's voice. Only this time, it wasn't just a whisper. He said, "Tanal, something is wrong with your sister." Chills ran down my spine. It was so real, so close. I froze, feeling the blood drain from my face. The words echoed in my head, and before I could control myself, I let out a scream, a blood-curdling scream that shook the entire house. For the next couple of days, I convinced myself I was losing my mind. Maybe it was the stress. Maybe the grief was finally getting to me. But my father's presence only grew stronger. I began seeing his reflection, just out of the corner of my eye, coming out of his old room. And the strange part? It wasn't just me. My sister would talk in her sleep, having full conversations, loud ones. She swore she didn't remember any of it, but I knew what I was hearing. It was my dad. He was talking to her. It was clear that my father's spirit was restless, trying to tell us something. But why? What was he trying to say? That night marked the beginning of a strange transformation in our home. I was constantly on edge, as if my father's ghost was hovering, waiting for something. My sister, however, seemed more distant than ever. She became withdrawn, quiet, and anxious. Her usual spark had dimmed, and it felt like she was carrying a heavy weight. It wasn't just emotional either. Physically, I felt the toll. My sleep became restless. My heart would race at random times, and there were nights where I'd wake up drenched in sweat, terrified by dreams I couldn't remember. Every time I looked into the old rooms of the house, I felt that lingering presence. It wasn't hostile, but it was desperate. We all began avoiding certain parts of the house, particularly my sister's room. She had started sleeping on the couch, claiming she couldn't get comfortable in there anymore. I noticed that she seemed haunted, not just by what was going on around us, but by something much deeper. It wasn't until we had a heart-to-heart, a serious conversation about what was happening, that the truth came out. As we sat down, the air heavy with tension, I asked my sister if she remembered any of the conversations she had been having in her sleep. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she shook her head. But after a long pause, she finally admitted something that shattered everything. She had been keeping a dark secret for months. She was being sexually assaulted. And the most terrifying part? My father knew. His spirit had been trying, with everything he had, to protect her. That's why he was still here. That's why he wouldn't leave us in peace. The weight of that realization hit me like a truck. My father wasn't haunting us out of anger or confusion. He was doing what any father would, protecting his daughter, even after death. The voice in the room, the restless spirit, the whispers at night, it was all him, trying to get us to see the truth. In that moment, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. My father had done what he needed to do, But at what cost? My sister was left broken, and we had all been haunted by something that wasn't just paranormal, it was real. The nightmare didn't end when we realized the truth, but it did give us closure. We could finally start healing. And as for my father, well, after that night, the house grew quiet again. His presence was no longer felt. He had protected his family, and now he could rest.